just to start with, thanks very much, Ellen. Our Gender Matters project began in 2018, working with a number of LUMS colleagues. So I just want to sort of give a shout out to Robin Remke, Claire Leach and Sophie Al-Khalid, all of whom have been involved in this project. And we do have an online feature with podcasts, short video, infographics, and I can put that link in the chat space after this talk. So, sorry, just trying to manipulate a couple of screens here. Wasn't that moving? So the Gender Matters project aims to highlight gender challenges in the workplace, and it's within the broader global context of the persistent lack of women in decision-making roles, and within our national context of increasing dissatisfaction of gender inequalities, such as the revelations of unfair treatment and pay at the BBC. And we've seen increasing media interest in gender issues and the introduction of UK legislation on gender and pay, and yet women continue to be underrepresented in positions of power in our organisations. There's a picture here of our cabinet, our own UK cabinet, and currently we only have 5 women out of 23 cabinet ministers. The Gender Matters project was set up to shed light on this problem by bringing together evidence of key gender challenges facing UK organisations, and it acts as a platform to gain insights from practitioners, professional associations and policymakers to help progress our understanding and to influence change. So we focus on 3 pressing challenges for the UK workplace that affect women's progression: pay, the leadership pipeline, and the challenge of managing the personal and the professional. The first challenge we highlight is the gender pay gap, and the Office for National Statistics gathers this data, but in the UK also since 2017, organisations of more than 250 employees have to report their pay data for men and women. So I just want to be clear about the difference between the gender pay gap and equal pay. Equal pay means that men and women in the same employment performing equal work must receive equality in pay and all other contractual terms such as overtime rates or additional benefits. So equal pay is for equal work. The gender pay gap is different. It measures the difference between men's and women's average pay. This graph looks at the gap over time by age. In the UK, the gap is close to 0 for those aged under 40. Those are the bottom 3 lines that you can see converging. However, those over 40, the top 3 lines, experience a widening gap. And we can see a downward trend here, but it's very slow progress over 20 years, less than 10%. And the gap reduces at a slower rate among higher earners. Evidence points to a range of reasons, including older women being more likely to be in lower paid occupations. And we know that typically the gap widens with family responsibilities, but we also know that women are paid less than men in top roles, a bias that is resulting from lack of transparent reward structures. And for example, the Office for National Statistics recorded a 22.7% gap in 2019 between men chief executive and women chief executives' average pay, which is very stark. The second related challenge we identify is the leadership pipeline. It's illustrated here with the image of the glass pyramid outside the Louvre in Paris. And one of the issues we've determined is the difficulty in getting year-on-year comparative data. So statistics here from 2017, but they show a distinct status gap with men overrepresented in senior roles and women overrepresented in junior roles. We're unable to find equivalent statistics for each of these categories since then, but we know from occupational data, those in director, professional, administrative roles, that this pyramid effect is still very much in evidence. A most recent report that you may have seen just out from the Hampton-Alexander review into female representation on UK boards has shown some good news, progress in UK top 350 companies, and that women now hold more than a third of roles on boards. And this is a good step forward, but if we look more deeply, we see that the progress of women is in non-executive roles, which are paid less than executive roles, and they have less responsibility and strategic influence. Men are still dominating the highest levels of business. The number of female FTSE 100 CEOs has increased by just one person since 2012, from 4 to 5. The third major challenge we identify that hampers women's progress is managing the personal and the professional. And there's evidence to show that family responsibilities such as having children or looking after elderly relatives affects perceptions of women and men differently. And people perceive women's commitment to work as much lower than men's when they become a parent. And this mirrors social assumptions of men's roles as breadwinners and women's roles as carers. Perceptions of lower commitment can be reinforced by organisational cultures that disadvantage those with caring responsibilities, the majority of whom are women. And these cultures assume the need to work long hours to progress, and they have a culture of having to be present. We have evidence that these cultures are particularly dominant in the finance sector, but we also see this in other cultures, including in higher education. We found that this challenge highlights a practice policy gap where well-intentioned policy fails to be realised in practice. For instance, we know that families welcome policies such as the shared parental leave introduced in 2014 to enable parents to share leave between them. Yet figures over a 3-year period show very poor take-up, with women continuing to take the majority of leave at this time. And reasons for poor take-up by fathers include not only financial considerations, but also concerns about perceptions of their lack of commitment to work. So if we look at these challenges together, we can see how they interconnect. More men than women in leadership roles, and at most senior levels with higher salaries, inflates the gender pay gap. Women's progression slows at middle manager level, which is often at an age where women and men have family responsibilities. Men's average salary typically being more than women's, their chances of career progression being greater, and concerns around perceptions of commitment to work on becoming a parent. These all combine to influence the take-up and effectiveness of policy. As women bear the brunt of family commitments, this has a detrimental effect on women's careers, which conflicts with professional roles and work cultures that continue to demand long hours. And managing these tensions can fuel perceptions of lesser commitment and set up barriers to further progression. Reinforcing the cycle and underpinning perceptions are social stereotypes of what are deemed appropriate roles for men and women in society. In our society, we assume women as the main carers and men as the breadwinners, and these assumptions can influence who is seen as suitable for work roles, making it difficult for those who break the mould, the stay-at-home man and the breadwinner woman. So we can see together how all of these factors can set up a vicious cycle that sustains inequalities. So, of course, we've had the pandemic, and this has had a significant effect, detrimental effect on women's equality at work. Globally, women's jobs are more vulnerable to this crisis than men's. They're hardest hit as they tend to have lower status, lower pay, work more in part-time jobs, and also women are disproportionately represented in sectors that are negatively affected by the COVID-19 crisis, such as retail and hospitality. So they're more at risk of being furloughed, and then they're higher at risk of redundancies post-furlough. Women still take on the main burden of care. More women than men make up single-parent households, And of course, that burden of care has increased due to COVID with limited support. All of these things mean that women tend to have dropped out of the workforce at a higher rate than explained just by normal labour market dynamics. McKinsey recently have cited irregular access to childcare, family responsibilities and stress as the key reasons for this. And a further implication is that in the UK, gender pay gap reporting was suspended for 2020, and for 2021 there's a reprieve of 6 months, so the deadline's been extended to October rather than April. There's a fear that this is going to send a wrong message, and that gender equality will slide back down the agenda as a nice to have rather than an essential fundamental requirement. So my final slide is that overall, you know, we do see progress, and we are to be thankful for that towards advancing gender equality, but it is slow and there's little progress beyond middle management roles. And there's also clear evidence that women's progress is at further risk due to the pandemic. So what can be done? Our evidence and that of many other folk is suggesting multiple interventions are required, including a need to review our organisational ways of working. With a move to the virtual world, this is the perfect time to review how that's worked, where it doesn't work, and including examining flexible working models that make it more than just a token, but models that actually work also in our virtual climate too. There's a real need to rethink organisational cultures. What values do they assume? Who do these values privilege and who are they excluding? How can we make our cultures more inclusive? And evidence is also pointing to the need to reappraise promotion and reward structures. If companies are seriously committed to making the most of all talent, then these processes need to be fair, accessible and transparent. Thank you.